All right, on the show today, Katie, Sarra, and Julian Marcus. So I came across these two in Portugal doing some interesting work called Body Poem. And, this is Katie's creation. Julian's also working very strongly with this. We got them both on. And I think, they'll explain what it is. But first, I always start with, how did you get interested in the body? I'll start with Katie. Like, what was the beginning of your journey where you thought, oh, I'm definitely interested in the body in a different way than most people?
Well, the beginning of my journey was fine art painting. So I've always painted from a young age as part of my survival. And as I painted, I embodied in paint my internal world. That's how I recognized that I exist in the world. And I went on to do a fine art degree, and then I trained as an art psychotherapist. And that's when I first understood the difference between an embodied image and a disembodied image. And I understood the nature of our internal worlds, where they become split off and disembodied. And so I worked for 8 years in Hackney in adult mental health as an art psychotherapist. And then when I came to Devon I was pregnant with my first child. I then, after about 6 years of living in the countryside, I started on a journey with tantra. So I was in the old paradigm of tantra with, the Osho of going into deep waters and out at sea and into all kinds of explorations in the anarchic days of sexuality, before consent came into the picture.
Before trauma and consent and all that good stuff. Yeah, we'll maybe come back to that. And I'll definitely come back to the creation of body poems. So, Julian, what about you? What sort of got you feeling interested in the body?
Yeah, for me, it was my parents. They both had done Tai Chi and yoga. So I was exposed at an early age to both of those practices and quite taken by the Oriental martial arts. I thought I'd do a degree in martial arts, but there wasn't one really. There was an Oriental Studies in London, which had a little bit of that, but I found a bodywork degree, which I was going to be a photographer or a martial art teacher when I was in my teens. And I thought I'll learn about the body so that I know how to heal the body and where the meridians and the points are. And then I fell in love with the magic that I saw in the clinic in the university. And that was 2001. And I've continued to train others and train myself in bodywork and embodiment since. I really fell for it in what I saw, the empowerment and the changes that happened in the clients that were seemingly at that early stage, miraculously getting better from all kinds of things. So yeah, that was the way in for me.
And I think we should definitely go back to wild tantra. I mean, how can we resist pulling on that thread a little bit? So for those who don't know, some people listening to this are probably really into tantra, some people not. This idea of a sort of old school way and, maybe more consent informed. Do you want to say a little bit about that? Because I think it's interesting, that change, if nothing else, right?
Yeah, so the old school tantra, so that's come to the metaphor of the turtle, which we have in Body Poem, which is a turtle represents emotional and erotic fluency. So I also co-direct the UK Sexological Bodywork training, the UK, Ireland and Portugal Sexological Bodywork training. And we have this image of the turtle, which is a metaphor for going into the water to feel some of ourselves and to notice in the soup of our bodies what we're noticing, and then onto the beach again to update our versions of ourselves. So old school tantra is going into the water without any particular agreements of what we're going to go into the water to dive into, and then we find ourselves whoosh out at sea in all kinds of altered states of bliss, nirvana, or trauma, like it's all in those.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. The water is the sort of experiences, like emotions, experiences.
Yes. So into the waters of our feeling states. That's the metaphor. So into the waters of where, because we recognize feelings through movement and changes in our bodies, biochemical changes. And so old school tantra is going into the waters and having ecstatic, maybe like sort of out of world experiences of Shakti Shiva and I don't know, all the different rituals that tantra facilitates. And ultimately, those tantra schools, sort of Osho orientated tantra schools, the intention, the good intention, is that we unravel and we suspend our ego attachments to who we are, and we discover the wonder of our connection with the universe and our connection with spirit, and we discover our true erotic liberation. But in that process, many of us drowned or found ourselves, as I did many times, like a prawn having come from deep sea experiences on a beach without any protection.
So just the metaphor loses me a little bit. So sort of back in normal life going, fucking hell, what was that? I'm wide open, or I'm a bit overwhelmed by these experiences, maybe of mental health issues, this kind of thing.
Yeah, dysregulated by, so it's a really kind of like coming apart journey, which is that's the intention for it. Whereas these days we're trauma informed, and we understand that that's not necessarily helpful to go beyond your resilient edge of resistance. It's not necessarily helpful to go into experiences where you lose your agency, you lose your ability to navigate and make decisions. And so with the wheel of consent now being a foundation, well, that's the foundation of the trainings that I facilitate, everybody experiences things a little bit at a time. So the turtle, coming back to the turtle goes into the water just enough to feel what we're going to feel in there, and then onto the beach to update identity. And body poem is a structure that supports that immersion into unconscious realms, and then the integration of that, of what we've discovered with our identity. And our identity secures our belonging. So as soon as we update our versions of ourselves, we are affecting our relationship with belonging. You know, do I still belong now? I've discovered this about myself. You know, am I still me? Do I still recognize myself as me? Do you recognize me as me? Now that we have swum in these waters and we've discovered these aspects of the self that were unconscious for a reason, and we all exile parts of ourselves for very good reason, because our belonging is secured by our identities adapting to what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And
Julian, I just want to keep this a three-way conversation. So, Julian, were you part of this tantra scene, or was it?
It's always been an interest, actually. When you said what brought me into interest in the body, my parents had a library, and they had lots of yoga books and some tantra books. And at a very young age, before I could read, I was dyslexic, so I couldn't even read very well when I could read. But the word tantra did draw my interest as a sort of pre-reading age. So yes, I've always also been interested in conscious sexuality or tantra, and I've done Katie's training in the Sexological Bodywork, and I'm continuing to support them as a second year and third year now in the CSSE track. So yeah, that's also a big interest for me. And the body poem that we teach can be very good for helping people understand their sexuality as well. So I work now as a coach, somatic sex coach, embodied sex coach, or with body poem, also with sexuality. So I wouldn't say I haven't done as much in the tantra scene as Katie, but I have definitely been, I've done Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent, hosted her in Portugal, doing Like a Pro. So yeah, we have some similar trainings definitely up our sleeves. Stream training by Ellen Heed. She's a fantastic teacher from the States, and she came to Europe to teach people pelvic work. Stream is about scar tissue remediation, but the realm that she teaches about scars is far broader than you would imagine, like a little scar on your arm. It's actually fascia adhesions and emotional stuff. So yeah, it's also a big interest of mine.
And you mentioned, we will get to body poem, just to be clear, but you mentioned sexological bodywork. I've heard this term just for the last 2 or 3 years. I've just heard it all the time now. Like, do you want to say what that is? Like, what body of work that is? Either of you that feels, you want to jump in there. I just keep hearing about it. It seems to be incredibly popular.
I can say a brief bit, Katie can say more, but I will say this. It's been popularized by Gwyneth Paltrow and this Goop series. It's now hugely popular, and the Huffington Post and some other big publications are raving about it, which can only be good because it's quite a unique practice that's helping many people. And I love being a practitioner of it. But Katie, you teach it and have had 8 or so bodies of students through your course, haven't you?
Yeah, so like sexological bodywork for me was like an island of few to arrive to after having been in so many out at sea tantra. I used to teach tantra as well and run tantra trainings and really immersed in tantra. And I was working as a tantric practitioner and as a sacred intimate, and really immersed in that work. And I wanted to understand, what is it about when we work with the body, and we work with being touched and touching, and we work with altered states of consciousness, what is it that's happening that supports a person to transform aspects of their lives where they lost their agency into being agent, into feeling more confident, into trusting spontaneity again, into being able to direct their intimate decisions? What are the mechanisms at work here? So I sought counsel with Kenneth Ray Stubbs, who's a sexual shaman who lives in Tucson in Arizona. And I spent hours with him. I went out to stay with him to learn about the energy bodies. And I also trained in shamanism, and I've done Kadoshka trainings and aura perception analysis training and recapitulated.
I'm still on sexological bodywork, Katie. You keep offering me. So I don't still don't know what it is. Is it like a sort of de-armoring, physical massage type thing? Like, can you like concretely, non-metaphorically, like what is it?
What is it concretely? So what I was saying was it was an island of safety and concreteness to arrive into after so many different types of training. So sexological bodywork is the only training in the world that I have discovered that has a code of ethics, code of conduct for working with altered states of consciousness through in body work. So it's working with arousal, working with genital touch, working with anal touch, that is one-way erotic touch. Sexological body workers always use gloves, and we have a code of ethics that supports a person to explore their relationship with arousal and relaxation, excitement, and all the different routes to pleasure and deep relaxation states with a very clear structure. And it's sexological bodywork, so it covers anatomy, it covers working with mapping, for example, genital mapping, anal mapping.
So what's mapping?
Mapping is as anatomical mapping, so you get to understand your genital anatomy from an anatomical point of perspectives, and also from a sensation perspectives. And so you literally are remapping your version of your genitals in your brain, and also with your anus as well. And it's a multifaceted training that has its foundations now in the Wheel of Consent, and it has its foundations with clean language, which is our coaching model. And I've introduced body poem as the coaching model for the UK, Ireland, and Portugal sexological bodywork training. And the Canadian training also uses body poem. There are sexological bodywork trainings all over the world. There's different satellites, and there is a core competencies and core curriculum that each of the trainings facilitates. So it became certified training in San Francisco as a development of Body Electric. And Joseph Kramer is the originator of sexological bodywork. He's the granddaddy of the training, and he was part of the AIDS crisis, where people in the gay community in San Francisco needed to continue with what they were discovering in altered states of consciousness through erotic practice, through anal massage, through anal mapping, just what is possible when you suspend the default mode network in the brain and you open up the possibility for reintegration of parts of the self that haven't been integrated yet. There's incredible healing potential. And so they began using gloves, and they began to separate, decouple partner engagement, romantic partner engagement, which a lot of the sexuality trainings are still kind of vulnerable to that becoming more dominant. So it's not about romance. This is decoupling romance and partner engagement with, and facilitating a clear, clean space where a person can explore their relationship with their core erotic themes in life, with their relationship with arousal and excitement, their relationship with relaxation, their relationship with body image, their relationship with making decisions, their relationship with consent, their relationship with navigating intimate decisions, and their relationship with trusting spontaneity and rekindling that innocent, tender parts of the self that have for all of us been interrupted by our needs to adapt in different cultures and societies that we've grown up in. So it's a profound training that creates a really clear structure, and it's based in clear ethics and practice. And that's why it's such a popular training. That's why it has stood the test of time. And that was why it was such a relief for me to come to, having experienced all kinds of, I went to every far reach in my explorations, working in the field of sexuality for many years, working with hundreds of people and studying and learning what helps us trust our spontaneity again in a safe way without getting burnt, so and that's when I've discovered the Sexological Bodywork training, which I now teach and co-direct, and out of that, birthed from that, I discovered clean language. And I'm also in a Playback Theatre company where we play back people's internal worlds on stage. And I've understood the power of radical acceptance.
Okay, enough topics. Katie, every one of those, I could have gone into like 5 topics there, and listeners would be like, what's Playback Theatre? That's another topic. So, Julian, what's your thing in the body poem then? So you one of the trainers, your business partners, like let's clarify the relationship.
Yeah.
Katie's the founder of Body Poem, right?
Yeah, so Katie developed it over lots of different applications in her professional life over about 14 years. Then can I just add 1 or 2 clarity points for SexBod? Because I think Katie would, and the listeners might appreciate. Is that right, Mark? One thing is that the practitioner always remains clothed. Another one so it's one-way touch. If there's genital touch, the practitioner remains clothed. And if there is genital or pelvic touch, there's always gloves worn. So these things differentiate it from the broad, still practiced tantric kind of practices that go on. And in a sexological bodywork session, like you said, what is it? It's client-led as well. So we don't prescribe, oh, this would be good for you. This breathing would be really good for you. We listen to the client and see what they want help with, and we make a learning contract and agreement. And we never do more in a session than has been talked about and agreed. So if a client is feeling arousal and they want more of a certain type of touch, we would not do that in that session, because parts of the brain structures go offline in arousal. And after a session, somebody might regret doing something that they felt like doing in the moment because they were aroused and asked for it. So there's these really good safety structures in place with CSB, Sexological Bodywork, which I just wanted to mention, which makes it quite different, not better, but different and very useful from Tantra. So Body Poem, yeah, I'm the co-director of trainings. Katie invited me a year or so ago, and we've run a few trainings together. And Body Poem fascinated me as a name but I didn't get it. I really didn't get it until I experienced it. And now it's one of the differentiating factors on the other training, the Sexological Bodywork training, that Katie and Kian, the directors of that training, use body poem a lot and wheel of consent. And it, to me, it's just lucky that I know Katie and Kian, but I wouldn't want to do that training without those two parts. So the body poem, yeah, we share 18 weeks, 9 modules with our students, and they learn how to listen, deeply listen, and to support clients or students with body focusing, to listen in, to notice what sensations are happening in the body. And when the student client starts to speak about their experience, we frame that, as Katie said, with clean language. We don't say, oh, how scary, or how beautiful. We don't lead them down any garden path of any particular orientation, because it's client-led as well. So we use clean language. And Katie alluded to Playback Theatre there. With the third stage is we use dream form or dream scribe. We write down exactly, so we guide the client through their own somatic noticing. We just hold space. And at certain points, there might be a poignant part where they've investigated a certain sensation or feeling or emotion in their body. And when they're in that real noticing, we might say, and if this part had a voice and could speak right now, what might it say? So the body poem is written by the dreamer, the client, or the student. It's not something that we come up with. So these are the 3 main elements of body poem. And we have 1 or 2 trainings a year and retreats and workshops in England and Portugal. Our online training begins in March.
Hang on. So you're plugging stuff. First of all, let's find out what it is, okay? Before you start your marketing. Yeah, I specifically asked you not to do that.
Oh.
Okay. So I'm interested in body poem. I had a taste of it and I enjoyed it. And I want to differentiate it. We've been talking about a lot of sort of sexual stuff. There was nothing in the body poem process that I did that was sort of touching genitals or sexological. So for the clarity of listeners, it's a different body of work to that, right? Like, yeah. I think that's important for people to understand, that it's a different body of work. And tell me if I'm wrong here, maybe Katie, there's an internalizing process, maybe something a bit like focusing people might be familiar with, of really tuning into the body. Is that fair to say?
Yes, so body poem is body focusing. What are you noticing? And what else are you noticing along that thing you're noticing? And what kind of tingling is that tingling you're noticing? Or what kind of ache is that ache you're noticing? So we're beginning the process of animating what a person is noticing. We're supporting a person to find words that come close to describing what they're noticing. And it's particularly useful for people that have a disconnect with language and what they're noticing in their body. So it rekindles those connections. And so a person might actually be noticing nothing. What are you noticing? Well, I'm not sure. Well, what's that like to not be sure about what you're noticing? Or like, I'm noticing nothing. Well, what kind of nothing is that? Nothing that you're noticing? You know, we might offer some kind of somatic suggestion, like, is it a heavy kind of nothing or a light kind of nothing? Is it a fluid kind of nothing? Is it a solid kind of nothing? Is this nothing have a color to it? So we're supporting people to get more articulate. This is emotional and erotic fluency with languaging what they're noticing in their bodies. And I understand language to be the bridge between your world and my world. That's how we come to understand each other and ourselves. And without that language, without the ability to fine grade, like, I feel sad, I feel happy. Well, without any kind of detail with what kind of sadness and where's that in your body and what are you noticing and what are the sensations there, when we begin to tease apart through body focusing, through Eugene Genlin's work, body focusing work, then we begin to animate those parts of the body, and we find language that comes close to describing those parts. And words hold unique references. They resonate with unique memory channels and neural networks and associations in all of us. So as a practitioner, we stay out of the way of the other person's experience. We trust that every human being has a self-organizing intelligence if we just allow them to unravel and unfold. And we're asking questions. What are you noticing? What are you noticing? What are you noticing? What kind of thing is that you're noticing? And they're going into the waters, which we have a responsibility as practitioners when we guide anyone into the waters of their bodies, because they can be going into altered states and trance states and find themselves not being able to swim in that. So then we come back, what's that like to notice? So all the while we're coming back onto the beach, you and me in the room, what's that like to notice? And there's a possibility of a person being able to start to caretake parts of themselves which feel vulnerable, sad, disabled, exiled, not accepted, angry, whatever they are. And body poem adds in the third question, which is what comes from Playback Theatre, which is, if this part could speak right now, what might this part be saying?
Okay, let me again on kind of tease apart some stuff here, because it's really interesting. So first of all, helping people language subtle, deep sensations. So someone might sit there doing Vipassana for a long time and they're getting in touch with their body, but because they're not really articulating it, so I think I agree with you here, something is missed. So having a skilled facilitator to ask good questions to help them sort of fine grain look at their experience. And then there's also this almost like, call it almost like sort of poetic layer, right? That it's like, it's very different to say, there is stiffness in my fifth cervical vertebrae, then my neck is like a mountain. They're different things, aren't they? Right? Even if I'm in touch with the same feeling. So that sort of, and literally people come out of it with a poem, right? So I remember doing this process. It's not body poem as in a metaphor. You're literally writing in this clean language kind of way. You're writing down their exact words and then you read it back to them, right? This like playback principle of someone showing you. I had an experience in Russia not long ago with some of my students who do playback. They did a whole playback thing based on our trainings in Russia. And it was like, I really felt God. I really was like, yeah, that's what it's like. I really felt seen. And having it externalized was much better than just fucking thinking about it. So am I kind of on the right track here? I'm trying to give
Absolutely. Absolutely, you're on the right track. And that's something that I've experienced in Playback Theatre as well. Having your internal world acted out in front of you, externalized by other people that are simply using your exact language and not trying to reframe it or make it better or having their own take on it, exactly in your own language, seeing your internal world accepted in the voice of somebody else does something fundamental to feeling, oh yeah, I belong and I'm, this is acceptable how I feel. And yeah, you got me. Yeah, you've heard me. I feel heard. I can hear myself in your voice. I can listen to myself in your voice. I'm held in the voice and the mind of another. And of course, our voices connect with our hearts. So I'm held in the heart of another. And that's essentially how Playback Theatre works. And so I've adapted Playback Theatre to this practice of its radical acceptance and literally supporting a person to hear back the words they have spoken, and how we repeat back with body poem, as you witnessed in your embodiment conference that you ran in Sintra, in Lisbon. The dream scribe, as that's the role of the body poet, reads back and changes the order, and our voices become more rhythmic, and then it's like creating art out of pain and suffering. Art is birthed, poetry is birthed from what might feel mundane, what might feel...
It's interesting intention there, isn't it? On the one hand, it's clean, and it's, I know if they get it even a little bit wrong in playback, I didn't say that. That's not my
exactly. Yes.
Even just a little bit off, you're like, no.
Yeah.
And when it's on, it's I don't quite why, some profound sense of being seen or being witnessed. And there's also this tension between it's very clean, but then at the same time, there is a creative process, right? So that there's a bit of a paradox there. Julian, what got you hooked on it? Because you're obviously, you're dedicating a lot of time to this now, and obviously in Portugal there's so much good stuff going on, and all the stuff you've done previously. What made you think, oh, this is the thing I really want to dedicate myself to?
There was a couple of things. One was we were kicking off this collaboration at the beginning of what's been going on in the world, this virus, and this was an extension of the bodywork that I'd been doing 20 years. I saw with the people that I was sharing this with that they were getting profound insight and changes somatically without me touching them. So this was a great work that could be done through Zoom, which we had to do for a while. And then when it opened up again, I started using it as a way to do an intake. So someone would come in, like you said, and say, I've been to the chiropractor and I've got a problem in my 5th cervical vertebrae. And I want it sorting out. And then I would say, are you open to hear about body poem, or say something similar? And they'd say, oh, that sounds interesting. What's that? And we'd do a short tuning into what they would like today. I remember in Lisbon, you said, so what are we going to do today is one of the questions you ask your corporates, like, come on, shake them.
Today's session is the classic coaching kind of
exactly. So Body Poem has a 7-minute version of that, where we get to a list of things that they might think they would like help from me, and then we could debunk some of them that if I can't do that, and blah blah blah. And we can then ask the client, you walked in and you said you've got this pain here and you would like pain relief. Then we've done this short somatic focusing and body poem session to notice our I want list for the session. Now, what would you like to focus on today? And more often than not now, it's something that came up in the body poem that seems more of an underlying organizing principle to their wellness and their well-being than just simply pain relief. So I felt for many years as a body worker that there was more that we could have achieved in a bodywork session. And I could see it in clients' eyes as they left. They were grateful, they had less pain, they perhaps felt better, but I could see this, something was missing. So for me, body poems enabled me to go deeper with people and use it with hands-on clients as well as coaching. So I use it in my bodywork, and that might look like what kind of pressure and where would you like my hands in a craniosacral sense? Where would you like the touch? Where would you like to receive the touch? And what's it like to notice that touch? So again, it becomes client-led bodywork. So I use it like that, and that's how it's been powerful for me and kept me interested. So the effect it can have online and how it can support and enrich the bodywork that I do.
Cool. How is it different from other things out there? Like having done a bit of focusing, for example, and my teacher Paul Linden has a sort of internal listening. Like lots of systems have this kind of like deep internal listening, and maybe what does the body want to say, right? Like it's quite a common. I'll do that in coaching sessions with quite corporate people. Be like, okay, you say your stomach hurts. If your stomach could speak, what would it say? And people quite quickly, without much skill, are quite surprised. They go, oh, it says I'm working too hard. That's why I've got indigestion. I'm like, oh, no shit. Okay, great. So like it's quite like, what makes it different from those kind of processes, or is it just sort of your own version of that, which is fine, right? Like it's fine to have your own flavor of a sort of more widespread thing.
Yeah, it's really similar to what you've described, Mark. And it is so surprising when we say, "Whoa, if that ache could speak, or that tummy rumbling could speak, what might it be saying?" And we know straight away, don't we? Like if we don't censor what's coming out of our mouths, oh, it's saying I'm too tired, and so ultimately, the aim of Body Poem is to support that self-care and self-regulation and acceptance and being listened to and coming home really to feeling acceptance and self-kindness. So where body poem has become a ritual of what you've just described, Mark, there is a specific ritual, the specific roles that everybody agrees to at the beginning. And the questions, we know what the questions are going to be before we begin. And there's a beginning and there's an ending. And where it's become a ritual, that's where the Playback Theatre influence has evolved into a ritual form, because Playback Theatre is ritual. And the reading back as an art form supports a practitioner to be in their own creativity, which is scary for some practitioners to enter into that. because you're on the precipice of presence. You're not allowed to interpret. You're not allowed to reframe. You're not allowed to ignore what a person said. You actually...
Yeah, it's never totally clean. Like, so I remember,
No.
for example, when you did it, there was always tone of voice, there was rhythm, cadence. Like, these things are adding an interpretation of some form, right? So there is a sort of personalized creative element, which I think is not a bad thing, right? We're not a computer. There's some element of intuition and something else surely coming in there.
Absolutely. It's a real relationship. It's a real authentic relationship between the practitioner and the client, the dreamer and the dream scribe. So it's a trust in your intuition as a practitioner with what questions you ask, what avenues you focus on, how you read a person's dialogue back when you've written it down. You know, this is our toolkit. It's a pad and paper and pen. What you focus on repeating back, what you ask. I mean, you could ignore the tingling and ask what the ache is saying if the ache could speak. And you know, we're all making selections, but trusting in the alchemy. Say you and me were doing a body poem, Mark, you know, like we would be in the particular alchemy of you and me. And I believe in my years of working as a psychotherapist, I noticed that people would speak to me about stuff that they knew I would understand, and they wouldn't speak to me about stuff that was outside of my awareness. It's the same with Playback Theatre. When I'm on the stage, storytellers telling their story, and the conductor says, "Who do you want to play back you?" We're all standing on stage. We all know who they're going to choose because we all know each other. We all know exactly who they're going to choose. It's just like it's like, of course they're going to choose her, or of course they're going to choose me.
Because they sort of embody a particular archetype, or is it more subtle than that? I mean, so I found, for example, as a trainer, the projections I get upon me have changed over the years. You know, I'm starting to get more dad ones now. I've got a bit of white in my beard, for example.
Yeah, I think there's those archetype projections, but there's some just really like wild things that happen. Like, I don't know, say I had experienced a particular, I don't know, like say I just lost a family member. Right. And the teller is telling a story about their family member that they lost. They're going to choose me because unconsciously somehow
there's
they
a
know.
soul reading we're all doing, even people who aren't body skilled, as it were. There's a
soul.
It does seem like that's the case. So sometimes I open up to the taxi driver and he's exactly the right taxi driver who also was in Afghanistan or something. I'm like, what? You were in Kabul?
Yes.
And like, that seems to happen more often than coincidence.
Doesn't it just? Yeah. Taxi drivers are amazing like that. I've had some incredible taxi drivers that are just the perfect taxi driver that, you know, you came into my life at exactly the right time. You understand what I'm just, going through without any conversation beforehand. We know somehow. And I think body poem, that the structure and the ritual of body poem acknowledges that and accepts that. And actually, that's really great. If we're going to share aspects of ourselves with somebody that's going to hear and know what we're going through. Wow, I've bridged my world with another person. I'm not lonely anymore.
And you've kind of, I'm not sure if you've copyrighted it, but you've kind of put a package around it as like, okay, this is a thing, body poem. I've done that with practices before, embodied yoga principles and certain schools of coaching I've developed. And that's quite rare for us Brits. The Americans do that all the fucking time. The Israelis do it sometimes. The Germans never do it for some reason, almost never. But it's, how was it to sort of say, right, this is now, because it's bold, isn't it? To say, this is a thing. Like someone said, this is Watsu. Someone said, this is sexological bodywork. Someone said, this is, John Smith's de-armoring process. Like, how is it to sort of put a thing around it and say, right, this is now body of work, I'm going to certify people? Like, how is that? Because I know a lot of listeners haven't done that. Like, I've got a lot of listeners who are very, very experienced, 20, 30, 40 years, but they would never dream to do that, maybe through humility, maybe through lack of confidence, cultural conditioning. So how was it for you to do that process?
Well, it was, I was just doing this thing that has these components that we've described. And I was, as a kind of a short-term reference, oh, let's do a body poem on this. How about we do a body poem on this?
Yeah.
And then I thought, oh God, body poem's such a kind of cliche word. You know, why would I use the word body poem? I should use something much more intelligent than that. But we were naturally, amongst people that I was teaching body poem over many years, just started to kind of use it as a shorthand. Well, let's do a body poem on this, because it does support the illumination of what we know already. And so creating body poem as a thing was a thing to do. And I acknowledge and honor the parts of body poem, because body poem is body focusing.
We have today, right?
It's clean language, and it's dream form from Playback Theatre. They're the three main threads to it.
And let me just give you a nod for that, because I have some guests on who act like they created the thing they're out their ass, you know, back to our anal de-umbering. You know, we have some guests on who they're like, yeah, and later on I read a book and find out that they were like heavily influenced by another teacher. There's a, you know, they call it Watsu 2.0, you know, but it's so I do like it when people acknowledge sort of their main influences. It's sort of respectful, I think.
Yeah, and it creates I think it supports the ritual of it, that supports it as a discrete, okay, let's do a 15-minute body poem on this, and then whatever we do outside of that's what we're doing outside of that. But we kind of, it creates that container, creates focus of attention, and it supports a kind of a dismantling and integration and everything that can happen poetically and in that container, and then we can come out of that and reflect on what was that like. So I think it creates it creates a sort of a container around the specific ritual of it.
It makes it a thing, doesn't it? It's powerful and simultaneously limiting to say, let's do this thing, right? That it's got, and it creates a container, which for a ritual makes sense. It gives anyone who's like listened to this podcast or done one before, like, oh, okay, it's a body poem. Okay, so you know, it kind of creates a thing. But how's it been more like personally? Because there's something about this that many experienced practitioners from anywhere other than the US and Israel, in my experience, don't do. And I'm trying to figure out why. Because you're literally the only other Brit that I've ever met who's done this, and it's you and me. I really struggle to think of another Brit who's made a system with a name.
Okay, yeah, I think I have I don't feel like it's something that, because it's made up of parts, and the thing, a body poem is the shorthand to this is the ritual we're doing, because the thing is I'm slowing down my voice. I'm asking you specific questions. You're answering in a specific way. It's weird to start having a conversation in a body poem unless you create a container around it. It's just too weird. You know, it's outside of our normal social conversation. It will be outside of that. So the
waiter.
But in terms of like body poem, the each person that comes to body poem, that learns body poem as a structure, people coming from all different modalities, and everyone, I give body poem away to whoever learns that structure to weave it in and adapt it to whatever modality that they're practicing. And so body poem is kind of like it evolves into all different aspects of body work and organizations, and it's used in group work, it's used in lots of different ways, really creative ways. And so I give it away like that, but what I do hold is the ritual and structure of it supports the transformations and the acceptance to take place when we all agree that these are the rules of this particular boundary.
I mean, you get into policing if you're not careful, don't you? And having standards and examining, and you know what is and isn't it, and what's not allowed. You know, like this is the difficulty I've found with, if I make a system, it's like, well, if I say there's no edge, then there's no standard, there's ethical problems, there's quality control problems, as it were. And if I say there is an edge, all of a sudden I'm a fascist, you know? So, you know, I'm telling everyone what to do and enforcing things. It's not an easy position to be in. I mean, I was more pointing to sort of like, how was it for you personally? but that's like, is it just like, yeah, it seemed fine, so no big deal, like, and credit to you if you're there.
Yeah, it's just a shorthand for it's the name that it just like the name just kind of, oh, it's body poem, you know. It's just, that's what we're doing. It's like what it says on the tin. That's exactly what it says on the tin. I would have much preferred, if I was going to create a structure, to have something a bit cleverer.
You don't choose the name either, do you? That's what people don't realize. You don't choose the name. The name sort of just comes along as well. Then you're like, oh, now we're stuck with this.
Yeah, everyone knows it as body poem. I can't change the name of it now, you know. But actually, it just says what it says on the tin, and I've actually come to love its simplicity, and it's just, you know, that's what it is.
We've got to wrap up before we sort of tell people where to find out more and the training and stuff like that. Last thing, Portugal. So you guys are in Portugal. I will be moving there. I'm in Portugal now, technically in Madeira. I sort of see Portugal as a potential sort of embodiment hub for the future. Do you want to say a little bit about Portugal, how it is? Julian, if you want to come in here, like, you know, making your home there, the scene there. Obviously, I've been sort of starting to help bring a few people together. Like, yeah, like, say a bit about Portugal, just for listeners who might be thinking, well, what's that? Is it Spain? What's that got to do?
Yeah, it was really off my radar. I came here for my other work, for film and photography, 10 years ago. And I've done both. I do production and bodywork, and now embodiment. So in Portugal, I'm seeing such an excitement and concentration of communities. I've just moved from Sintra, but the groups there on these social media apps are approaching 1,000 members in different groups. I'm seeing a lot of interesting stuff, and helped by you. And over the 10 years that I've been here, I've done a lot of networking and exploring of retreat centers. There are beautiful retreat centers throughout Portugal. And there are some good hubs. Obviously, Lisbon being the capital and around in Sintra has more contact dance practitioners than other areas.
Yeah, great contact there. We're going to have about 10 Portuguese teachers on the podcast in the next few months, by the way. You just the two that happened to say yes first. So I'm going to promote some of the established Portuguese teachers who have been there a long time. And, you know, people like the Paz brothers. And then there's, you know, Rita here, who's just on the island, some great contact teachers, isn't there? There's some really good stuff happening. Yeah. So, yeah, I hope it becomes a bit of a hub, like, you know, San Francisco was in the 60s kind of thing. But, we shall see. Okay, I've got to head off. Before I do, where do people find out? You can plug your training now, Julian. Okay, so where do people find out more?
We have a Facebook page and group if you search Body Poem, and we have a website, bodypoem.org, which details our shorter and our full certification training. Anything you want to add there, Katie?
Find bodypoem.org. We've hopefully described Body Poem, and then on Thursdays we are doing free webinars, because it's such an experiential, like you experienced. It's something you need to experience or witness to kind of understand it, because it's so simple. It's a no-brainer, but in that simplicity is that's where the depth of understanding is understood. So on Thursdays, like tomorrow, what day are we on today? We're on Wednesday, yeah. Wednesday. Tomorrow, we're doing we do free webinars on Thursdays, most Thursdays, 7 till 8:30. You can find those webinars, the details about those on my Instagram, which is Katie Sarra, or on Facebook, Body Poem. And they're free, 7 till 8:30. It's on my personal Zoom code. And we do 2 goldfish bowl body poems, like I facilitated at your embodiment conference. So we have 2 brave, courageous participants.
It's great. It's great when you see someone else do it like that. It's really useful. And it's Katie, Katie, Sarra,
right.
Sarra, right?
That's
People
right.
are Googling you. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys both so much. I think we'll leave it there. Thank you both.
Such a pleasure, Mark. Thank you. Really lovely to see you, and I look forward to seeing you in Portugal.